guys, welcome to another episode of Cooking Break with Dani. Today we're here with a dish that I actually featured a week or two ago on my weekend vlog. So if you guys are unfamiliar, I actually have a main channel. This is sort of like where we're fun and we explore, and I do a little bit of my actual educational background. But I do have a main YouTube channel where we talk about beauty, lifestyle, do weekend vlogs. You see the shenanigans I get into on the weekends. And so a few weeks ago, I had a bunch of leftover stuff at home. I was worried that some meat that I defrosted was about to go bad. So I got a little creative and I made a meal that I extensively enjoyed, and I wanted to share it with you guys because it covers a bunch of topics that we've talked about before on this channel already, or that might benefit you guys in the future. So today we're going to remind you about mise en place. We're going to talk about the importance of cutting meat against the grain, and we are going to talk about the importance of becoming familiar with spices and herbs so that we can figure out common ratios or recipes, and they will really enhance our meals. So I'm doing something that is laughably easy. However, it's going to take like you slaved over the kitchen for a long time, because you're going to know what to do with the spices that you have taking up room in your spice cabinet. So I'm going to show you guys a very simple spice mix that is going to make your food taste like fajitas, or like Mexican food, or like tacos. I know that is a grotesque generalization and we all have different flavors that we're used to, but this is sort of like an overview or a very friendly way of saying, hey, I'm gonna make you taste like grilled tacos, yay! But we're not gonna use the grill at all. In fact, we're gonna use the same saute pan that we use in almost all of these videos. Y'all, stainless steel is your best friend. So we're gonna get started on this fajita skillet or fajita saute, and it's super, super easy. You're going to need basically all your leftover vegetables, a bunch of spices, and you're gonna cut it all up and cook it at extremely high dry heat. Y'all, like I said, it's super easy. Now this is a 10-minute meal. This video, however, will not be a 10-minute meal. So if you want to see how we do a very simple stovetop fajita style meal, then all you have to do is keep on watching. All right, you guys, so in the previous Cooking Break with Dani, we discussed mise en place, and we've talked about it several times before, and that just means having all of the ingredients and your tools ready to go so that when you need them, they are in front of you, they're preheated, they're portioned out, they're cut, they're ready to go. Today's meal is basically using a bunch of stuff that you have lying around. You could use zucchini, you could use red onion, white onion, you could use scallions, you could use cilantro if you have some. I actually like to do mine with a couple of extra items that I don't have today, but we can leave them out and it will still be a delicious dish. So I want to start off with our spice mix first, then we'll chop out all our vegetables, then we'll cut the meat last. We'll cut the meat last for safety and sanitation reasons, so we want to get all of this stuff out of the way before we start handling some raw meat. For the spice mix, you're going to need obviously salt and pepper, the usual. We're going to use garlic powder, onion powder, some ground cumin, which is going to add that sort of smoky spice that makes things taste like Mexican food, and some paprika. We're going to mix all of this in a bowl and have it ready to go for when we cut our meat. We can actually season it with that. So what I like to do with a recipe like this is I will usually prepare a larger batch of it and I will save it with a lid and use it every time I need it. For example, in here I actually have my chicken thigh seasoning. This mix is the best seasoning that I have ever come up with, and it makes all chicken taste like perfect chicken. Any chicken tastes amazing with this spice blend. So you can see there's some Italian herb in there, a lot of other secret stuff. If you want to see a video on it, let me know, and I can do maybe like my top 3 seasoning and flavoring mixes that I use pretty much every week. So for now, we're gonna do the one that we need for today. When I have 2 spices that are similar in size, color, shape, smell, I like to do them in between other spices so that I could visually measure how much I'm using. I will list the measurements in the description box below, but for purposes of this video, I don't usually measure, so that's kind of what I'm gonna do here. So I'll do equal parts onion and garlic. And if you were getting familiar with these flavorings or spices, you could do the paprika in between each of these so that you could see that difference in color. and see that you are using the right amount. And we're gonna use some paprika, and we're gonna use some cumin. Not as much cumin though, because cumin's a little dangerous. You wanna be a little shy with that. And then we're gonna do a ton of salt and pepper. All right, so here we have our mix or our combo. It should look like a really light orange. And after we fully combine this, we are going to cut whatever vegetables we want to use. And we call this fajita because we're cutting everything to look like fajitas. We're cutting it in advance. So what we're gonna use for today's stir fry is whatever leftovers we have in the fridge. So I already washed and dried 2 of my ingredients. We have 2 jalapenos. Now let's take a minute to talk about these sad jalapenos. I grew up in a really humble home, and we didn't turn up our nose to food that looked like this. In fact, a lot of the food bank food that we would receive looked like this, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with it. Wrinkled skin like this simply means that it's losing some of its moisture, and so the skin is shriveling. Is it rotten? No. Is it gonna make you sick? Absolutely not. Does it still taste the same? Yes. So I see so many people disparaging food and wasting it when it's still so good, and this is one of those examples. For the jalapenos, I am gonna cut them in strips like for fajitas, but I'm going to make sure that I very carefully leave the seeds inside of the actual pepper. So we're only gonna have a few little rogue seeds that come out. Oh my gosh, whew, that one is a spicy one. It just came up and I felt it in the back of my throat. All right, let me show you guys one more time how I did that. So we're gonna take the pepper, fold your fingers under, and go right up against the skin. Try to get 0 seeds this time. Practice those knife skills. Bam, we did it. So we have those right there. We're gonna set those aside. We're gonna do the same exact thing with this red pepper, except visualize that it's a really big one. So we are taking the sides off of the pepper. We are also going to take the bottom off of the pepper. Open can. And to cut the pepper, it's the same as a tomato. You have a shiny side and then you have the inside. You always want to cut with the inside facing you so that it's easier to get through. So we're going to take the flesh side up, shiny side down, and we are going to cut it in even strips. If you guys see, I'm choking the knife, so I'm pinching it at the heel, and I'm never putting my finger up on the blade. So choke the knife, you are in control, and you're gonna cut it into fajita-like slices. Same over here. Same with this one, and this one too. And the last ingredient that we have left to cut is this onion. I actually don't want to use all of it. I just want to use probably about 2/3 of it, a little more than half. So we're going to set that one aside, and we're going to cut the bottom part of it off. You want to make sure that you cut off through the root. So if you cut through the root, you're able to cut through the layers, and it'll actually separate really beautifully when you cut it and when you're cooking it in your saute pan. So you guys remember how we cut an onion? It's like a rainbow, right? And you want to cut through the rainbow in little wedges, especially for this dish. So I'm going to put my hand over it, and I'm going to go in on the side. And we're going to have these beautiful onion strips for our fajita dish. So we have our vegetables cut, we have our spice blend ready to go. Now all we need to do is cut the meat. Today we're gonna use sirloin, and we're gonna use sirloin steaks. That means they are about 1/2 inch in thickness. Sirloin is a very affordable cut of meat. It's also very tender and very lean in fat. So sirloin would be a great cut for something that you want to be quick cooking, something like fajitas or bistec ranchero. if you wanted to bread, like do a chicken fried steak, you would use a sirloin like this, maybe something even thinner, like for milanesa, which is a breaded steak in Mexico. And we're gonna talk about cutting against the grain. So I'm gonna show you guys a close-up of meat. Sorry if you guys get skeeved out, but can you guys see the muscle tissue? How there is grain? So the grain on this muscle is running this way. And the importance of knowing how to see the grain in the tissue is because when you go to cook this or chew it, when you're eating it, you want to be able to do this. If you were to pull this way, there's no give because you're going with the grain. So if I were to cut the meat this way, strips of grain, I will chew that for 10 years and never be able to get through it. If I cut against the grain, every bite that I take, I'm gonna be breaking apart the muscle tissue. So it's going to take a very cheap cut of meat and make it seem very, very tender. Now, every cut of meat needs to be cut against the grain, including food like chicken. So keep that in mind. Do you guys see the grain of this steak? Do you see how it stretches? That's how you want to cut it, against the stretchiness. I can't stretch it this way. Do you see how it's taut? It just gets really hard. You never want to cut it this way or you're never going to be able to chew through it. You want to cut it against the grain. So cut it like it has steps in it. So let me show you guys. This is one of those family multi-packs that I got at my local grocery store. It often goes on sale. It freezes really well, and it's also a very lean protein. So if you want to incorporate protein and you're over chicken, sirloin is one of my absolute favorites. So with this one, I don't really bother removing too much fat. This is kind of an end tip of the sirloin, so I'm gonna remove it just because it does have that sinewy fiber. Do you see that shine? That is something that you can never chew through. So I'm just gonna cut that off. But for purposes of this dish, you wanna find where the grain is and you are going to cut very thin strips. Holding your knife like you're in control, you're in charge, don't be nervous. And this is what you want your strips of steak to look like. Do you see how they're super, super stretchy? That's what you want. So we're going to take all of these steaks, these 4 steaks, and we are going to cut them into thin strips. So there we cut our sirloin steak. Everything is against the grain. So when this hits really hot, dry heat, like a saute pan, it's going to shrink, but it's gonna be very easy to chew. All right, the final thing that we're gonna do, because this is a quick cooking dish, we're not gonna leave it soaking in salt. We are going to add our entire seasoning mix. So add it evenly over the top. And then use your hands. You already put your hands on the meat, y'all. Use your hands to massage it in, blend it in. You don't need to rub it in hard. This isn't a marinade or a rub or anything. We're basically just seasoning it evenly so that it has flavor on every delicious cut of meat. All right, you guys, prepare yourself for like the anti-ASMR. We are going to cook at a very high dry heat. Dry means no liquid. We're gonna use a very small amount of fat, which is going to saute the meat. Saute means cooking at dry heat. That means no liquid, a small amount of fat, and you must use a saute pan. So what you're doing is you're sealing in all the juices on the meat and you're caramelizing the outside. It's a process that you don't want to rush, and it's a process where you can't crowd your pan. If you are to overcrowd your pan with a crazy amount of protein, all that's going to happen is all of the juices in the meat are going to flow out and you're going to create sort of like a parboil of product, and it's gonna look gross, it's gonna look gray, and it's not gonna be the prettiest. So if you have to cook it in batches, or if you have to use a bigger pan, or if you have multiple pans, I would recommend doing that. So for purposes of this video, I'm just going to cook a small amount of it to show you how I do it. Now keep in mind, this is a kitchen sink recipe. In a perfect world, if I had an endless amount of groceries just lying around, I would add lime juice and cilantro to this recipe as well, but I don't have those on hand, so I'm gonna show you guys the real deal Holyfield, how we do it here, okay? So this isn't staged, this isn't pre-planned, this is like, hey, I think I can actually do this. And I wanted to do it this way intentionally because that's the whole point of this recipe. Take the spice blend and whatever you can find in your fridge and slap it into a tortilla and make a taco. I guarantee you're gonna love it. So let's get to the stove. All right, you guys, we have a stainless steel saute pan. This is a 12-inch and a very high flame. When you're adding food to your pan, you have to compensate for the heat value. The steak that we cut was cold, so I'm cranking up the heat as high as it'll go, and I'm going to put a very small amount of fat, super small, like the lightest drizzle. This pan has been preheating the entire time we were cutting ingredients, but I had it on a low heat. I just cranked it up, which means it's not gonna take much time to get super hot, and we are going to drop our meat in the pan. Remember, don't crowd the pan because you want to hear that sizzle. If you crowd the pan, you're going to simmer your sirloin. You're not going to saute it. So I think I'm going to do this in 2 batches. If you ever listen to any cooking advice that I give you, listen to this. Leave it alone. Don't touch it, don't shimmy it, don't flip it, don't put a fork in there, don't play with your tongs, leave it alone. If you want to get a golden caramelization on your protein, leave it alone. It'll tell you when it's ready, and it'll tell you because it will be easy to turn over or to shake around. A lot of times people say, I hate stainless steel, everything sticks. It sticks because it's not ready to be flipped. So leave it alone and you'll know when you can flip it over. Do you see how the juices are coming off of the meat right now? Do you see how they're a little more liquidy? That's the protein on the bottom has coagulated, so it's created a seal and it's pushing the juices out over the top. So now you can flip it and seal the underside. Have you guys ever noticed that they rarely ever ask you how you want your meat when you order fajitas? And that's because it's grilled. And when you grill a thin steak, it's obviously gonna be medium to medium well because of the high dry heat. That's similar to what we're doing here, and you could see the juices at the bottom are a really beautiful, rich golden brown. We are gonna pull these off the heat now and keep cooking the second batch of meat. Crank up the heat again, get it ready for a little more oil, and we're gonna add the second batch of meat. Now the only reason I have batches is because I'm cooking for 6. Normally you would cook for 2 to 4, and so it's a lot faster. Or if you had another saute pan, you could do 2 at a time. Drop it, leave it alone. Now would be a great time to add the vegetables. So I'm going to take my onions, my peppers, and my jalapeno and drop it in the pan. Vegetables are naturally going to release a lot of sugar and a lot of liquid, so your saute is not going to be so sizzly anymore. So turn up that heat on high. Is one of my favorite parts. Right now is where you would add your squeeze of lime juice and your splash of Mexican beer. If you have it on hand, if you leave it out, is it gonna make a big difference? No. If you put it in, is it gonna be better? 100%. So I actually have this little piece of lemon lying around that I wanna use up. So I'm gonna use that. And a little splash of Pacifico in my bride koozie, thanks to my friend Rachel. That beer is gonna give it a really delicious acidity, and it's also going to remove all those delicious brown bits from the bottom of the pan. It's gonna create sort of like a Mexican gravy. Yeah, I said it. Let's go ahead and add back the first batch of meat that we cooked. Look at all that flavor, you guys. That's all flavor, don't waste it. It's all that onion powder, garlic powder, paprika. Always season as you go. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna do a little taste test right now. Dip a little spoon in there, take a piece of meat out. Do a little taste test. It's like a thermometer check. A little thermometer gauge. We need a little more salt and pepper. That jalapeno is so spicy, but in like the best way possible. And here I am adding more pepper. You don't want to cook it too long because you don't want to lose that brightness of the vegetables. I'm so glad I added that lemon. It tastes so good, you guys. And there you have the completed fajita steak skillet. Super easy, you guys. I promise there aren't as many steps as I took, but when you're cooking for a bigger amount or for more people, it's important that you don't take shortcuts so that you don't do a disservice when cooking certain proteins. If I were to have thrown all the meat in at the same time, you would have never gotten these golden pieces. The gravy or the sauce wouldn't have been this dark, rich brown with a lot of flavor. The meat would have all just been gray. So you wanna make sure you never take shortcuts when you're cooking meat and you want a specific outcome. There we have the completed fajita skillet. Super, look at that, all that shine. It's super juicy, super low fat. I just served it with plain rice pilaf. That is similar to the rice recipe I already have on my main channel, which I'll link in the description box below. Very similar, except instead of tomato bouillon, we use chicken. And it's easy, you guys. It's so easy. You can do it in a pinch. You could add zucchini. You could add all kinds of colors of peppers. You could add even little bits of potato in here if you wanted a heartier meal. The tortilla is optional at this point. So it wouldn't be a cooking break with Dani unless we did a taste test. Oh my God. Why is this my favorite part of every video? Probably because I get to eat. One tip I would tell you guys, always add the vegetables when you're almost done with the cooking process if you want that crunch. Otherwise, they're gonna get super soft and it won't look as pretty. You want it to look like fajitas, and fajitas look like strips of food. They're still a little crunchy, there's still a little snap to them. So add those at the very end. I'm gonna need a minute. I'm gonna need a minute alone with my tacos. All right, you guys, as always, if you wanna know ingredients, descriptions, amounts, tools, all of that stuff, it will be listed in the description box of this video. If you love this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with a friend. Y'all need to become a part of this Cooking Break with Dani family, okay? We need to eat together, we need to share a meal. Let me know what other substitutes you would add to this skillet to make it killer, or maybe a different spice or herb that you would add in addition to what I already shared with you guys. I love you guys so much. Let's eat.